going to take Nine Routes comment here / question and kind of broaden it out to the Ohio State fan base and wherever they show up on whatever site. So in taking comments and questions from all fan bases here, I may have a little bit of a broader perspective possibly, but I think most fans have a very skewed, biased opinion of their fan base and their rivals' fan base in particular and other fan bases for obvious reasons. That's not a criticism. That's just human nature. And that's how people look at things, that either their fan base is on point, great, we know what we're talking about, we're knowledgeable, or, you know, our fan base is crazy, they're delusional. And really everybody's fan base to a large extent is delusional and crazy and so forth. And when the expectations, it's one thing to be a fan base and monitor the fan base at Purdue or Kansas State or West Virginia when they're churning out 7-5 seasons and what the expectations are. I think they seem to be more reasonable, of course, versus Ohio State fans who seem to, there's certainly a faction of them that go overboard. And we saw it leading into the Notre Dame opener where, okay, we're winning this game by 5 touchdowns. Let's move on. You know, we need to knock out 11 before Michigan and we're on our way kind of thing. And then when things don't go right, i.e., of course, Michigan, the Oregon game 2 years ago, then it's we're horrible, fire everyone. And then it's the other direction. So do you guys have any thoughts about the Ohio State fan base maybe possibly being a bit unique?
How long do you have?
All these fans are what make it possible for me to do my job. I love you all. I mean, you know, it would be very foolish for me to get out there and to get on too much of a heater here talking about this. But I will say that I think that message board culture, and I've been a big message board guy for a long time now, after I got out of quote unquote legitimate media here to the internet. There's just, you know, I can't control much of my life. The wife's on my case and the boss is a jerk and the dog crapped on the floor and everything else. So I'm going to, you know what rolls downhill? I'm going to get on a message board. I'm going to take it out on everybody because I'm not on here as John Q. Public. I'm on here as Buckeye fan 124 and nobody knows who the hell I am. So I could be as big of a, you know what, as I want to be. And there's no comeuppance that's going to happen there. I mean, and it's funny because I spent a lot of time working in a different network for more than a decade. And I would see people who would run out the life of a message board handle, would cancel and sign up under a new one so they could just start all over again. But, you know, I think, and sometimes there are guys that are just like, I'm going to show you how big of a non-homer I am, even though I'm a humongous homer. I'm going to be more critical than anybody, which obviously will shed all of my homer points, even though maybe I believe what I'm saying or maybe I don't. But on the flip side, sometimes having a couple of those voices in the room, while, you know, a couple bad apples may spoil the bushel, you also don't want a message board that's an echo chamber. You just don't want it to where it's groupthink and everybody agrees all the time, because that's boring and people are not signing up for that either. But anybody that wants to sign up for Buckeye Huddle, I'm here for it.
I just the one of the things that I don't like are the self-loathing fans, that because I have some Michigan fans who reach out to me and tell me, like, you're so right about Michigan. They're doing this wrong. They're doing this wrong. They're doing this wrong. And I was like, love your team. Enjoy your team. Don't use me as somebody that you're going to throw your Michigan anger on. Like, I can get that from Ohio State fans. I don't need it from Michigan fans as well. But there are some people who want to be right more than they want their team to be successful. And I think that's where you get some of it. But I'm with Kevin. I think the more voices, the better. And if that voice has, you know, some money every month to put forward to a subscription site, even now, but it is better when there are multiple viewpoints. And the thing is that if people want to be wrong on the internet, there's going to be so many people there to tell them how wrong they are. It kind of polices itself that way. So Mark, I will not use your exercise here to bash internet fans. I'm not going to do that. I'm appalled that you're trying to do it.
I'm merely reading the question and interpreting.
It's college football. It's college sports. Like in college, like Ohio State fans are not unique. College sports fans are not unique. That's just fandom how much of it is bad? The bad is really bad. Like you ask parents of players about the bad, they will tell you stories of the bad for days. But what percentage is that of their experience? And maybe it's a larger percentage of the feedback that they seek or not even seek, because it's the comment card thing where how many comments do you leave that are good at a restaurant? You leave the bad ones, you leave the bad reviews. And it's the same thing with social media on feedback to players. You leave the bad reviews, you don't leave the good reviews. Marvin Harrison makes an incredible catch where he somehow contorts his body to get a toe in. Nobody adds him and says great job. But if he gets knocked out of a game because he gets concussed and is targeted, you probably have like 150 people telling him get back in the game, you're weaker. Now, obviously that didn't happen, but you have it's the negative that will result in the higher numbers. And I can go on a rant about the entire media world, the news media. It's the more negative you can put out there, the better the ratings. And I'll just end there so that we don't skew too far off. But it's the negative feedback is always going to outnumber the positive feedback. That's why I consider, for all of the people watching this, and only a fraction have hit the thumbs up, the rest are being negative. That's what I'm saying.
Well, it goes back to the old, if it bleeds, it leads. And when I worked in television, WSVN in Miami was one of the biggest culprits of that. If it bleeds, it leads. And, bad news and everything else. And I mean, even in running a website, 12-0 or 0-12 are the times that you have the most activity. Either everything has to be going right or everything has to be going wrong, because 6-6 creates indifference and apathy. And, suddenly we're not going to turn this into a basketball show, but I think that's kind of where the Ohio State basketball program is to a certain extent. There's just, apathy is growing because people are dissatisfied. I mean, the team isn't bad enough for there to be wholesale changes made at this point, but they're certainly underperforming compared to the lofty expectations that people have that basketball should mimic what football is doing. But it's I have been on message board communities throughout the entire college football universe back again when I was working in the other network, and this is not something unique to Ohio State. And there are certain fan bases I just won't even take on Twitter because Tennessee, there are just ones that are just too difficult to deal with and who will not leave you alone. And Tennessee, so I don't think it's something that's unique to Ohio State, but since we're all in the midst of it, the four of us are talking about Ohio State here on the show, and everybody who's part of watching the show either cares about Ohio State in a positive or maybe in a negative way, as I've seen Michael Campbell's in here, who is a big Notre Dame guy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We notice it. But it does get tiring. And sometimes as somebody tasked with having to moderate a message board, and you kind of get the same repeated ball peen hammer attacks to the side of your head, right on the temple of the same, pardon my French, the same shit every day. But it is what it is. I mean, and we signed up for it. I don't know where, but we signed up for this.
Looks like Steve's staying silent there. We'll move
on.
I've lived with this for over 25 years. Just, we used to get, when I worked at Buckeye Sports Bulletin, the weekly newspaper, we would print the letters to the editor. Me and I am just struggling today, which was the predecessor to the message boards. And everybody would be negative about John Cooper. And then we go over and talk to John Cooper, and he goes, You print those negative letters to the editor, you're too dang negative. You're too dang negative. You got Buckeye in your title. You're too negative. Like it was hurting his recruiting that, Jim from Jacksonville was mad, that they lost to Michigan for the umpteenth year in a row. So, yeah, it was a different time, that's for sure. But the same people are out there. That is definitely the case.
But Steve, to that whole thing, like, was it Gary Gerkin?
Yes, Davenport, Iowa
was a guy, and he's famous among those of us who would read Buckeye Sports Bulletin, or it was the predecessor. He would write letters to the editor, and then you'd read them and be so angry because he's ripping on your Buckeyes, like he's got some issues, and you're like, this guy, and he becomes like this niche legend basically. But that was the predecessor to message boards. It was letters to the editor. And Steve, also being at BSB, you guys had to answer phones from people.
From Gary Gerkin. That guy would call in from Davenport, Iowa, and can I talk to Steve? And he would tell me about, I played offensive line in the war on a football team during World War II. And now this was back in 1995. I'm talking to him on the telephone about something that he did back in the 1940s. So, yeah, it was really something. I got to tell you, he was an actual lit. People thought it was all put on, that we sat there around the office and we wrote those letters to ourselves, but that was not the case. It was I would get a handwritten letter from him about once or twice a month, and if things weren't going well, maybe even more often than that. But it was always about the offensive line. The offensive line is where it always began, and it's still, even 30 years later or however many years later, that's still the case.
Yeah, R.I.P. Gary Gerkin passed away a couple of years ago.
Yep, he did.